All right, we are live. Let me go live on Instagram as well. 1 second here. Let's wait for this to populate. And we are live on YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, all major platforms. We are live. All right, let's get started. Let me pull up my slides here. Get that on the screen nice and clear. Sorry for the delay on this one. This one's a little complicated. I don't usually do these live. We're used to doing our lives on politics and politics and prophecy and politics. This is more of a Bible study. I record these and I put these on YouTube. This is part of a whole series. I don't usually do them live. I usually pre-record them and then post them. But we're going to try this out. We're going to try this live. And it's going to be a very spicy subject. Why did I choose this subject to do it live? I don't know, but I'm just going to do it because it needs to get done. I've been waiting too long to get this topic done. Okay, so let's get right into it. Welcome everyone back to our series, The New World Order and Bible Prophecy. I am your host, Joshua Fontanilla. Let's get right into our subject. We are on part 7 of our series on the New World Order and Bible Prophecy. Check out the playlist on YouTube. This is part 7, The Beast and American Liberty. So if you have not watched this series so far, you're jumping right into it because I am going live with this one. There's going to be some shocking stuff. And if it's some things that you have not heard before and you're saying, you don't agree, look, go back and watch the others. Go back and watch, especially part 4 and part 5. We're going to identify who the beast is in Bible prophecy. That is from Revelation chapter 17 and Revelation chapter 13, the first half of it. So I go into those in detail there. We don't have time in this lesson to do that. We're assuming you know those topics. So I'm just going to jump right in. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the beast on one side versus American liberty. And we're going to see there's a contrast and there's a conflict between the two. This is going to be a spicy subject. Let me give this preface. I'm not condemning individuals, and I've said this multiple times. I'll say it again just to be clear, especially for those who are new. We're going to be talking a lot about history. We're going to give a lot of quotes, and we're going to be looking at the Catholic Church organization a lot. Quotes from the Catholic Church. I am not talking about Catholic people. I'm not here to condemn any Catholic individuals. I'm not here to say that Catholic people are not saved, or anything like that. Because I do believe that there will be untold numbers of Catholics in heaven and good Catholic people. But I am going to quote sources from the Vatican. And I'm talking about what the leadership teaches, what the organization teaches, not condemning individual Catholics. Okay. So let me be very clear on that. But we need to look at history and we need to look at reality and what's going on here. So the beast versus American liberty, the beast versus American liberty. Let's start. Well, here's our overview so far. Let me just give you an overview of what we're going to cover in this series, in this lesson today. The event that sparked the American Revolution. We're going to start there. A lot of people don't know this history, and it's crazy to me. This stuff isn't taught because it's controversial. But what is the event that sparked the American Revolution? You might have heard some things of, there was taxes and things like that. No. I'm talking way before that. What is the event that sparked the idea of even having an American Revolution? Not the immediate issues that made it happen, but what was the event before that made it, in the minds of the American colonists, made it even something they would consider? Okay, so we're going to look at that. We're going to look at moral laws versus religious laws because I want to make some things clear and I don't want people to be confused. I do believe that we should have moral laws in this country. Okay, So I'm going to clarify all that. I am for banning abortion and banning gay marriage and things like that. So I want to be clear about that. But there's a difference between that and religious laws. We'll see that. And then we're going to look at American liberties. We're going to see the beast's tyranny. This is where we're going to get a lot of quotes from the Vatican, from the papacy, and so forth. And then we're going to preface our next study, which is there danger coming to America? And you will see our next study is America in prophecy. So please watch this one, and then the next one you will see America is predicted in Bible prophecy. It's an amazing lesson. You do not want to miss that one. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Let's give a overview, a background, kind of a review of what we've done so far. And again, if you are just joining us and you don't know what I've been talking about, let me make these slides bigger. Okay. If you don't know what I've been discussing so far, the Vatican, the leadership of the Catholic Church, not the individuals, but the leadership. We're talking the papacy and the cardinals and so forth. This organization has been identified in Revelation chapter 17 as the great harlot of Bible prophecy. It's an organization that fits a description very clearly in prophecy. The Vatican, the Catholic Church, the leadership, not the people. That is the first beast of Revelation chapter 13. I don't have time to go into it today. We've proven this before. This is the position of all the Protestant reformers. But we'll move on. What we've gone through so far in this series on the New World Order and Bible prophecy is we've looked at the fact that the world is governed by evil men, for the most part. Most world governments are governed by men who are controlled by Satan. And the way that they do that, one of the ways they do that is through secret societies. We've seen in our last presentation on the secret behind secret societies that the Jesuits control and created most of the secret societies. And I have really good quotes on that. So go watch that one if you haven't seen it. The secret societies behind the scenes are Luciferians. They're devil worshippers. It's no big surprise. The Bible's very clear on this, that evil men rule the world. So this should be no surprise. What I've done is I've simply shown exactly how they are ruling the world, giving quotes from their own organizations. The goal of Satan has been, ever since the Tower of Babel, to have a worldwide government, to control the whole world, one world government. Satan controls it by controlling the men who run this one world government, and thus Satan rules the world. That's his goal. That has been his goal since the Tower of Babel. God messed it up, his whole plan up, by dividing the nations through languages. And today there is a push back to have this global tyranny again. So everything that is behind, attacking the idea of separate nations and national sovereignty, the devil's behind all of that. The devil is behind all this mass importation of let's bring, people from this country and send them over to that country, and let's flood all these Western countries with people from the third world, and let's get rid of borders, and let's make it so that the people in these countries are replaced. And you notice it's the Christian countries that are all getting replaced by people from the Middle East and of other religions and so forth, right? And they're starting to control the language, so you can't even speak against this, which is why I'm speaking in code a little bit now, right? You guys get the idea if you've been paying attention in the news. This is all part of Satan's plan to bring us back to the Tower of Babel. Okay, that's review. Let's move on because we don't have a lot of time. What was the event that sparked the American Revolution? What you see on the screen there is an artist depiction of St. Bartholomew's Massacre. If you've never heard of this, go and look it up. This is the kind of art that was drawn, that was painted at the time to depict it. It's gory. It was a massacre. It happened on St. Bartholomew's Day. And I'll give you the date here on the next screen. But I mean, you can see just bodies everywhere. It's a slaughter that's going on. This is not a pretty painting. right? This is St. Bartholomew's Massacre. It happened in 1572. So just before the American Revolutionary period, during the time when the American colonies were really taking off, right? What happened was, and here's another artist depiction of it, Catholic leaders, so we're talking like bishops, Catholic leadership, and Catholic mobs slaughtered Protestants in Paris. They were encouraged to do so by the highest levels of the Catholic Church. They were encouraged to slaughter Protestants in Paris. Now, remember, this is the time of the Reformation. So Catholics had controlled, the Vatican had controlled all of Europe for hundreds of years. Generally speaking, they controlled the vast majority of Europe and of European countries for hundreds of years. And now here comes the Protestant Reformation, and they're causing this whole system to be thrown overboard. And they're breaking the monopoly of power that the Catholic Church had. And so, as a response to this, Catholic leadership was like, look, we have the authority, we have control over governments, and we have the right to, if you disagree and you try to ruin the unity of the Catholic faith, and they had their justifications. They felt they had the right to go and kill these people, kill the Protestants. That's what they did. And up to 30,000 people were killed. The slaughter lasted for weeks. And I won't go into all the details of the story, but it was so shocking to the world to see that the Catholic Church was willing to do this, that their leadership and so many of their people were willing to do this, that they would go to that extreme, that it caused Protestants and colonists in America to think, maybe the idea of a revolution is justified for Christians. Because before then, Christians, generally you look at the history of during the time of the Roman Empire, Christians were being slaughtered and martyred and largely just took it. But there was a debate that began to happen where Christians started to say, look, is this God's will that we should just allow ourselves to be slaughtered, even if we have the opportunity to stand up and say no? And so they began to have these theological discussions about it. And they wrestled with texts like Romans 13 and so forth. And you can see, the record is there in the history. In the American colonies, they debated this stuff. And it was St. Bartholomew's Massacre who led to a lot of the debate. By the way, this is a papal coin that was minted at the time of St. Bartholomew's Massacre, 1572. And it says here, Huguenots, those were the French Protestants, slaughtered, in Latin. And on one side, this is a papal coin. They minted a coin to celebrate this event. That's how much the Vatican approved of this. They minted a coin to celebrate it. This is Pope Gregory on one side, and on the other side is a depiction. This is like the mascot of the Catholic Church. If you've never heard of this, it's called Fides, which is Latin for faith, the faith. And it's a woman with a cross and wings, and so she's supposed to symbolize the church, and she has a sword in her hand, and the French Protestants are being slaughtered before her. And this was 1572. This was depicting St. Bartholomew's Massacre. Here's another image of the coin, the papal coin. You can find this online. It's not hard to find. They celebrated it. And thought, this is a good thing. We slaughtered these Protestants. After this happened, many Protestants began to flee Europe to America, even more. They had already done so, but even more because they said, look, we can't just put up with this. We have to leave. So they began to flee Europe for the American colonies. The dangers of monarchy and having all the power in just a few people's hands in the government were clear after this massacre. And the dangers of church and state uniting were clear after this massacre, because they saw that Catholic leadership could just go tell the authorities, hey, those people aren't the right religion, slaughter them. And that is exactly what happened. So when you read the American founding fathers and when they talk about the separation of church and state, well, look, I know that liberals and leftists today are using that term and they're going to the other extreme. And they're saying, kids shouldn't be allowed to pray in schools and Bibles should be banned in schools and all this kind of stuff. I know liberals have gone to the other extreme today. But you got to put yourselves, and we're going to talk about that because I disagree with the liberals on that, right? We're going to talk about them going too far and where's a good balance. But you got to remember back in this time, in the time of the American colonies, the danger in those days in the minds of the American colonists was having all of the power in the hands of the government. The power over not only like regular laws and that kind of stuff and crime and so forth, but no, the power to say if you believe something that we don't agree with, something that the state church doesn't agree with, in this case the Catholic Church, if you're a Protestant, we could have you slaughtered, burned at the stake, and do it legally. That was on the minds of many Protestants and many American colonists. They said this is dangerous because they said this is all the power. I mean, the power of over what you can think and believe, what you can believe, what your faith is, the way you practice your faith. That is too much power for the government to have. And so this is where this idea of small, limited government came from, because they saw the dangers of tyranny, right? So this provided the justification to resist tyranny, and it led to the American Revolution. Go look it up. Go look it up. The St. Bartholomew's Massacre. There was a few books that came that were written from this that sparked the ideas that led a couple hundred years later to the American Revolution. Okay, now just jumped right in here. We're talking about unity of church and state. This is going to be controversial. I probably shouldn't have chosen to offend everyone right at the beginning because hopefully you guys won't leave, but hear me out. I'm not here attacking Trump. That's not my point. I believe this man has done tons of good things, and he has, full disclosure, I voted for him 3 times. I think on economics and a ton of other issues, law and order, he's doing great stuff. The problem is the man is not a theologian. He's not a Bible scholar. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We don't need to have a Bible scholar to be our president. Don't misunderstand me. I think largely he's doing a great job. But I want to highlight this, that he named Paula White as the head of the new White House Faith Office. And the reason I want to highlight this is to show the dangers of uniting church and state. And that is that politicians who may be good leaders in other areas, militarily, economically, Trump's a good leader on those things, may not know what they're talking about when it comes to religion. And Paula White is, she's got many problems when it comes to religion. Okay. She's widely criticized for her cash for blessing schemes that seem to offer if you give $1,000, you will get 7 supernatural blessings. She's been married 3 times. This woman should not be the head of any church, the spokesperson of any church. She teaches a prosperity gospel, which is heretical. But Trump doesn't understand this. I'm not blaming him. I don't think he's a deep theologian. I think he just thinks, look, this lady, I get along with her. She's kind of like, my pastor. She says things I like. Let's make her the head of our White House Faith Office. She shouldn't be in that position, which highlights the danger of having politicians in charge of religious things. If you don't believe me, this is a screenshot from her release 7 supernatural blessings. We're requesting a gift of $1,000 or more. You're going to get these 7 supernatural blessings. It's prosperity gospel stuff. It's not okay. It's not okay. It's heresy. Now, let me be clear up front, because I don't want people to say, look, Joshua, The problem today, though, is because I agree with this. The problem today, though, is that liberals are going too far the other extreme, and they've taken God completely out of society and out of public life and out of government. And we need to have morality laws. And to that, I would wholeheartedly agree. What's happening, we're like seesawing in this country. We've gone from one extreme to the other. In the past, it was we had too much church and state united to the point where St. Bartholomew's massacre happened. And today we've gone to the other extreme where liberals are saying you can't even have kids pray in school, and you can't have Bibles in school, and you can't even teach anything related to the Bible in school. And there's all these other extremes. We've gone too far the other extreme. So there's a lot of conservatives today who will mock the idea of separation of church and state. But guys, what liberals have done with the separation of church and state is wrong. But the original idea of it was a good idea. Go look at history. Let's not be so black and white on it. There's a lot of gray area here. The phrase separation of church and state was written by Thomas Jefferson. You look into it. It's not a bad idea of separating the two to an extent. Now where's the fine line? Here's the extent. Let's clarify this. Moral laws versus religious laws. There's a difference. A moral law. Now, these are things that I think we should have. That would be things like banning abortion. Why? Because it's the murder of a life. It's clear. It's obvious. You can make laws on that. I agree with it. I wish we had federal laws on it. I wish it was, probably more extreme than your favorite politician. I want it banned in this country. So don't misunderstand me. I think we should have laws against gay marriage. This was something that was voted for by popular vote in California in like 2010 or something like that. It wasn't that long ago. We used to believe in that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's it. One man, one woman, that's it. I believe in laws like that. I think we should have laws like that, and we should try and get those laws back. Those are moral laws. There's a difference between those laws and a law that says you must believe the Catholic faith or else we're going to have St. Bartholomew's massacre, like we talked about at the beginning of this lesson. You see the difference? Okay, here's how it works. Make this more clear here. The 10 Commandments, people are familiar with the 10 Commandments. Do you realize they were written on 2 tables of stone? 2 different tables, right? The first 4 tables were about your relationship between you and God. So commandments like don't have any other gods before me, don't worship idols, blasphemy, no blasphemy, and the Sabbath commandment. These are about your relationship between you and God. The last 6 commandments on the second table of stone were about your relationship between you and your fellow men. So laws about honoring your father and mother, don't murder, no adultery, don't steal, don't lie, bear false witness against your neighbor, those kinds of laws, right? Those last 6 laws, which by the way, the 2 tables of stone can be summarized by the 2 great commandments. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. That summarizes the first 4 and the last 6 of the 10 Commandments. Okay, 2 tables of stone. What I am suggesting to you is that the way you understand what kind of laws we should have in this country is we should base them on the second table of the 10 Commandments. Those are moral laws. Enforce those laws. I think we should have laws against no fault divorce. I think this country was better off when we had those laws. I'm going to step on some feathers on that one, right? But I think it's true. I think this country was better off when we had laws like that. I think we should have laws banning gay adoption, banning gay marriage. These are moral laws that have to do with our relationship between man and your fellow humans. I think we should have more obscenity laws. You shouldn't be able to walk into a public place like a grocery store and hear the most debased music on just playing on the loudspeaker for children and everyone to hear. I think we should have strict laws on the last table, the second table, the last 6 tables of the 10 Commandments. But the first table, the first 4 commandments, you cannot put that in law, because once you do, that is uniting church and state. That is making it so government officials say you can only go to this church, not that church, right? You have to believe this way, not that way. You can't teach these religious things. You can only teach those religious things. That's what led to St. Bartholomew's Massacre. That's what happened during the Middle Ages when the Catholic Church ruled and men were burned at the stake for disagreeing religiously with the Catholic Church on religious laws. So this is what I mean when I say separation of church and state. The original idea of what that meant when Thomas Jefferson wrote it, not what the liberals do today, where they try to make it so you can't have any moral laws. The second table of the 10 Commandments. Right? Okay, hopefully that's clear. All right, so let's talk about American liberties. So what are we talking about when we're talking about American liberties? We're talking about things like freedom of religion. You should be free to believe what you want. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, which is connected to freedom of speech, due process of law for American citizens. And that's if you're a foreigner, your due process is, you get a quick deportation. That's what I believe. But for American citizens, yes, due process of law, fair trials, speedy trials, all that stuff. Here's the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. The Constitution and government's job is to secure these blessings of liberty with limited powers. Okay? First Amendment. No law abridging speech or the press. Here's a quote from George Washington. If freedom of speech is taken away, we may be led like sheep. We may be led like sheep to the slaughter. Thomas Jefferson, our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. Free speech, absolutely. These are American liberties. First Amendment, no establishment or prohibition of religion's free exercise. James Madison, conscience is the most sacred of all property. This, by the way, this is an image of a Waldensian church. Go look up the Waldensians and the Alps. They hid in the mountains because the Catholic Church outlawed their Christian religion. They were Protestants before the Protestant people. I've heard a lot of Catholics say, "Oh, the Protestants didn't exist till 1500." It's not true. Look up the Waldensians. Hundreds of years before then, they were hiding, and their churches were in caves in the mountains. This is one of their churches in the mountains, in caves. Okay, Thomas Jefferson, religion lies solely between man and his God. That is all I'm saying here. When it comes to religious beliefs, the ceremonies you do and the particular doctrines of your church, government needs to stay out of that. Stay out of that. Because government ruins everything they touch. We want less government, not more. Plenty of laws on morals, morality, I've already been clear on that. But when it comes to religion, stay out of it. Okay. Now, what is the beast's vision of government? What is the Vatican's vision? Well, you can get an idea by seeing this man, this Pope, sitting on a golden throne. Their vision of government, absolute control. Absolute control. So let's give some quotes here. The Catholic ideal government is the Catholic Church controls the government, church and state united. Oh, I need to get that. Hold on a second here. Let me get this image back up on the screen. 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay. The Catholic ideal government. The Catholic Church controls the government, controls the state, church and state united. This is what they had for hundreds of years during the Middle Ages. That is their ideal. That is what they want to go back to. Stomp out liberties such as free speech, freedom of religion. No. You don't get to decide those things. Your leadership, the Vatican leadership, decides those things. We decide what is free speech. We decide what is freedom of what is proper religion that you can believe, that you can practice. That is what they did. That's not only what they teach at their highest writings, that's what they did for hundreds of years. And that's what they will do again if they can. Right now they can't because there's so many people who disagree with it. By the way, the craziness that's happening in the world with the left going insane is starting to make people think maybe we should go back to the way it was in the times of the Catholic Church, because this is so crazy today. So we're going to swing one direction, then the other direction. Both of those things are bad. We should go back to what we had in America. Look, all we got to do is go back to what it was like in the 80s and 90s. And there was hundreds of years, or not hundreds, decades, well, really like 200 years of American history where church and state were not united, but we didn't have all this craziness that we have today. It's only the last few years, last like decade, that it's been so insane. I want to go back to that, not to the time of St. Bartholomew's massacre, but people see the extremes from the left and they think, well, let's go back to what it was in the past. We're going to go too far back. So what they did in the Middle Ages is, you didn't have free speech. This is their goal, written in theory and by their highest authorities and done in practice for centuries. So Catholics, you can disagree with this, you can disagree with me, but you have to realize that this is what they've written. Their leadership of the church has written this down in their official doctrines, and it's what they practiced for hundreds of years. So I don't know what your argument is. It's pretty clear. All right, I'm going to give you a few quotes now. So prepare for this. We're going to have to get through these quotes because I'm going to quote the Catholic Church. I don't want to just say this stuff. I want to show you for sure that it's true. So we're going to start with one that summarizes the whole theory of what the Catholic Church views government, the ideal government should be like. This is from Pope Boniface VIII, Unum Sanctum. And I'm going to quote a lot of encyclicals of the Catholic Church. These are papal letters from the Pope to the world, and they say this is what we believe. Okay, it's the equivalent in the mind of Catholics to basically, not completely, but basically the letters that you read in the New Testament from Peter and Paul and so forth, John. Papal letters, papal encyclicals. So I'm going to quote a lot of these. They have Latin names. Don't worry about that. This is from the date 1302, Pope Boniface. He said, "We declare, say, define." Notice he calls himself we. He speaks in the third person third person plural, because they take the place of God. They wear the triple crown, and God is 3 in 1. So the Pope speaks in those terms, which is blasphemous already. A man claiming to sitting in the church on a golden throne already, taking the place of God. You read about that in Thessalonians, but that's already blasphemy. Anyway, so he says, "We declare, say, define, and pronounce that it is for every human creature, it is altogether necessary for salvation to be subject to the Roman pontiff," or pope. It's another name for pope. So for your salvation, you have to be subject to the pope. That's what they teach. Okay, do you think they want a totalitarian government? Absolutely, they do. That's what they did for hundreds of years. The Catholic Church opposes, again, I'm talking about the leadership, not the people, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, private property. Oh, yeah. We don't have time to go into that one. By the way, if you want all the quotes on this, I've recommended this book before. It's called Ecclesiastical Megalomania. The Economic and Political Theory of the Roman Catholic Church. All the quotes on there. We don't have time to go into the private property stuff today, but it's all there. Civil and political freedom, they oppose that. Having the idea of electing your own government that you choose. No. You're not allowed to do that. Not if it opposes the Catholic Church. They don't agree with that. Here's the Pope, by the way, with the Triple Crown. Do you know what that means? It means the Pope claims to be the king of heaven, the earth, and hell, the lower regions. Triple Crown. Ruling everything. Like, over heaven? That is blasphemy. There you go. And freedom of religion, no, they oppose that. Okay, let's give you quotes on all this. Roman Catholic Church opposes freedom of speech. Here's a quote from Pope Leo the 23rd, and this is in 1888. So this is after the American Revolution. There's a couple encyclicals from the popes that came out where they basically are attacking the freedoms that are happening in America. So realize the context of this is opposing America, opposing the freedoms we have in America. So here they say, we must now consider briefly liberty of speech and liberty of the press. Okay. So what do you have to say on this, Pope? It is hardly necessary to say that there can be no such right as this. Okay, that's a problem. And then he goes on to say, if you say things we agree with, that's fine. But lying opinions, so who decides what a lie is? Than which no mental plague is greater, and vices which corrupt the heart and moral life, who decides what a vice is? Should be diligently repressed by public authority. Okay, so government can suppress lies and vices. How do you define that? Well, I'll tell you, for hundreds of years during the Middle Ages, they defined Protestantism as a lie and a vice, and it should be illegal. That is why St. Bartholomew's Massacre happened. It's not a good thing, guys. This is the exact opposite of what Americans believe, that you should have free speech, we should free and open debate, and let these things be decided in the marketplace of ideas. Let's have free debate. Let's see who can convince minds. That's what Americans believe. The Catholic Church opposes that. They did it in their highest writings from the Pope himself and in history. By the way, this picture is Gutenberg's press, right? From that, the idea of a press, that's where it comes from. It's the printing press. This is not Gutenberg's, but this is like the idea of a printing press. And this led to the Protestant Reformation. I mean, this was part of the reason why we could have a Protestant Reformation, is the idea that you could print these ideas and put them all over the place, and people would start to think these new ideas they never thought of before. And the Bible started getting printed by these printing presses secretly. They had to do it. They had to smuggle Bibles because the Catholic Church would not allow it. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. Oh yeah, here it is. This is the index. This is a visual, of a picture of the title page from one of the Index of Forbidden Books of the Pope. Did you know that the Bible, in the common language that people can understand, instead of Latin, where the average person couldn't understand it, the Bible in like English and in German, things like that, in languages that the Europeans could actually, the peasants could read, did you know that it was forbidden? It was on the list of the Index of Forbidden Books by the Pope. This is a fact, guys. And they said, look, you're not allowed to have these books unless you have written permission from your local bishop. And only the minds of the very learned men who have gone through our whole university system and been brainwashed with our thoughts, only those men can have Bibles written in those languages. The common person, outlawed. And they not only said this is a church law, it was a government law. Do you think that's a good idea? Well, that was the Catholic position. The only reason they don't do this today is because they do not have the power to do it. They don't control government the way they used to. They don't control the minds of the people the way they used to. They couldn't get away with it. But they've never will you find the Catholic Church at their highest levels saying, we don't think we should have that power. No. They said it as recently as the late 1800s. After America showed what it's like to have a free country, they said, no, we don't agree with that. I'm sorry, this is history. This is history. I'm not attacking individuals. I'm trying to show you history. This is the burning, this image here on the top right is the burning of William Tyndale. This happened in 1536. What was his crime? He printed the Bible, and he took the Bible and he smuggled them into, I think when Tyndale was bringing them into England, I believe. And he was bringing these forbidden Bibles, outlawed by the Catholic Church, and giving them to the people. He was burned at the stake for this. That is not, that's history. We should not go back to that. This is an artist depiction in 1842. Catholic priests burning Bibles in 1842. That's not that long ago, guys. It's not that long ago. Okay, question. But wasn't this just in the past, hundreds of years ago? Does the church do this now? Well, I partially answer that. They don't do it now because they don't have the power to do it. But they've never said we don't believe we can if we have the power. In fact, there's a quote in here. I don't have the time right now, but where they basically say, look, we appeal to freedom when we are not the majority. But if we get the majority again, all bets are off. Because freedom is your Protestants. That's your idea. That's not what we believe. This book is from 1958, so fairly recently. And it is called American Freedom and Catholic Power. Very interesting. The whole idea of cancel culture and the idea of silencing speech you don't agree with, a lot of people think that started with the left. But when you look into history, these tactics were actually outlined by the Catholic Church and practiced in what they did. You see this happening exactly today as well, but they basically tried to silence anyone who disagreed with them. So here's a quote from it. No one has a right to publish such literature opposing Catholic teachings, is what they're talking about in context, any more than one has the right to poison wells or sell tainted food. Okay, that's from Father John Heenan, priest and penitent. Now, their tactics were spelled out in a February 11th, 1928 article by Jesuit priest Charles Mullally, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, in the Jesuit magazine America. These techniques has been used even into the 1990s. And so the idea is you pressure advertisers, you pressure businesses you pressure advertisers and businesses, and you threaten them, and then they are the ones who are supporting the newspapers. So basically, if a newspaper says anything critical of the Catholic Church, what you do is you go to the businesses and you say, look, the priest will say, look, I'm going to tell my congregation not to shop at your business anymore because your business advertises in this newspaper and this newspaper said something against the Catholic Church. They laid it out, and that's what they did here in America. They couldn't do it through the government in America because they don't have the control, but they were still trying to silence different opinions. Here, this is 1958, this is published, and these tactics have been used up into the 90s. Now they have been adopted by the left for insane stuff, but that's what has happened very recently. Okay, moving on. Freedom of religion. Here's another quote again, and I'll give you the source here. This is from Pope Leo the 23rd, again, 1888. Freedom of religion. First, let us examine that liberty in individuals which is so opposed to the virtue of religion, namely the liberty of worship, as it is called. Okay, a whole lot of words there. So he says, let's examine this liberty, which he doesn't like. And he's calling it liberty of worship, or liberty of conscience, freedom of religion, whatever you want to say. There's a few different ways to talk about this. Here's his opinion on it. Not opinion, but here's his proclamation. Justice therefore forbids, and reason itself forbids, the state to be godless or to adopt a line of action which would end in godlessness. So definitely they believe in church and state united. So they're saying justice forbids this, reason forbids it, namely to treat the various religions as they call them. That's not even a religion if it's not Catholic. To treat the various religions alike. So government should not treat the various religions alike. The different churches, no, they should not be treated equally. And to bestow upon them promiscuously, he's speaking badly about this, right? It's promiscuous. To bestow upon them promiscuously equal rights and privileges. So the idea that all the different religions and churches would have equal rights and privileges, he says, no. Justice forbids that. Reason forbids that. He wants church and state united. Going on. Another quote, same source. Another liberty is widely advocated, namely liberty of conscience. If by this is meant that everyone may, as he chooses, worship God or not, it is sufficiently refuted by the arguments already adduced. So he thinks the idea that of liberty of conscience, that every man may, as he chooses, worship God however you want or not, that has throw that out the window. And remember, he's talking in context of government, the state, liberty of conscience. We're talking about church and state here. The idea is they reject freedom of religion. This has been proven by just looking at their history. Hundreds of years. Do I need to show you the papal coin again, where they celebrated the slaughter of Protestants? That is what the papacy and the Vatican believes. Now, there's plenty of Catholics who don't believe this because they don't know what their leadership of their church believes. But friends, if you're a Catholic and you're watching this, I'm telling you, this is what the leadership of your church believes. This was printed in 1888. Remember, the American founding was 1776. This is written in response to the idea of having freedom of religion in America. That's what it was written for. And they're disagreeing with the idea that every man can worship God as he chooses. Catholic Church says, no, we don't agree with that. The state should not treat all the different religions equally, should not give them equal rights and privileges. That's the idea. Okay. And I can give so many more quotes on this. I'm only giving you one or two for the sake of time. I could give multiple on each subject. Again, go read Ecclesiastical Megalomania, but we don't have the time. All right, moving on. The Roman Catholic Church opposes political freedom too. The idea that you can vote for and choose who you want to be your leaders, no. Here's the quote again. Pope Leo the 23rd. This is from, I can't pronounce that, but it's 1890. He published this, and it translates, and it's basically known as Chief Duties of Christian Citizens. Here's the quote. Union of minds requires not only a perfect accord in one faith, but complete submission and obedience of the will to the church and to the Roman pontiff, that would be the Pope, as to God himself. It's Pope Leo the 23rd. Or I'm sorry, 13th. Pope Leo the 13th. By the way, you know who our Pope, the Pope, I wouldn't say our, it's not mine. You know who the Pope is today? Pope Leo the 14th. And he took the title to celebrate this man, the previous Pope Leo. 1890, that's not that long ago, guys. That's not that long ago. Here it is, Pope Gregory the 7th. This is an old one, but they've never said this isn't true anymore. This is Pope Gregory the 7th. He says, that of the Pope alone, all princes shall kiss the feet. That would mean princes would be leaders of nations. that it may be permitted to him to depose emperors. So if a leader of a country, if an emperor or a king opposes the Catholic Church, the Pope can kick him off his throne. That is what the Catholic Church believed, and that's what they did for hundreds of years. And here's a papal coin, another papal coin, where the Latin words omnes regis seriente, it's a quote from a psalm that all kings shall serve him. But who's the him here? Notice the picture. This is a papal coin. Notice the picture. There's the cross, but here is the Pope's triple crown. So who's it talking about when it says all kings shall serve him? Well, you look and you say, hey, all the different kings have to kiss the feet of the Pope and he can kick them off their throne. So they're talking about themselves. There's the triple crown. There's the triple crown. Okay, that's the idea. Everyone has to obey the Pope. You don't have freedom of speech. You don't have freedom of religion. You don't have civil freedom where you can pick whoever you want to be your leader. No, if Pope disagrees, he can kick that guy off the throne. That's the idea. It's totalitarian, dictatorship, complete, because it not only controls what you can do, but it controls your religious beliefs as well, what you can say. That's totalitarianism. That is the opposite of American liberty. Now, again, there's many Catholics who don't agree with this. And I would say it's their job to deal with their disunity with the beliefs of their church. Because these are the popes. I've given you multiple popes over and over again who say the same thing. And it's not only what they write in their official writing, it's what they did in practice. So if you disagree with it, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, look, you can go to church and you can say, yeah, I belong to this church, and then turn around and say, I don't believe in Jesus. Well, okay, you don't believe the teachings of this church. So why are you even there? I would say something similar. It's not the exact same thing. I'm not saying Catholics disagree with Jesus, but it's similar to Catholics who believe the Catholic faith. They go to Catholic church, but they disagree with the teachings of their own church. I mean, I agree with them, but I would say you're not in agreement with your own church. So I don't understand why you would stay if you disagree with something as foundational as this. Okay. Here's another one. This is another papal bull. That's a very strongly worded letter from the Pope. This is 1559. This is Pope Paul the Fourth. The Roman Pontiff, and again, here's the picture of the Triple Crown. The Roman Pontiff who rules the offices of God and our Lord Jesus Christ on earth, and who holds the fullness of power over kingdoms and kings, and who judges all, and by no one at this time is judged. That's complete power. Total power is what they believe, in the hands of one man. Now let's contrast this with the New Testament. We're almost done here. We're almost done. Let's contrast with the New Testament. Freedom in Christ. The Bible teaches, the New Testament teaches liberty of conscience. That the conscience of a man, what the man believes, what God has convinced him in his own mind from his own reading of Scripture, is paramount. And you should never go against your conscience. That is the most important thing. And that produces saints, that view. That produces holy men. That produces righteous nations, having people like that, because they're ruled internally by the Spirit and by their fidelity to how they understand Scripture. So 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17. I'm just going to read a couple verses here. We're almost done. Now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty. The New Testament teaches liberty. Liberty in Christ. Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19. This is Jesus reading, and he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, and to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." Liberty in Christ. Matthew chapter 20. And this is maybe the most important text of this lecture. How should we have, what about freedom of belief within the church and among Christians? Should we have one man ruling over the conscience of all other men, as the Catholic Church, as the popes teach? Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 through 28. But Jesus called them unto him and said, "You know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you. But whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister." The word there is servant. Let him be your servant. "And whosoever will be chief or leader among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many." So should we have men lording it over other Christians? And I am the supreme leader of all, and everyone, for your own salvation, you have to obey me. Is that the view that we should have in the church? Absolutely not. Jesus says it shall not be like that among you. All right. I'm going to finish with this thought. Why was Christ condemned? Do you know why Christ was condemned? Why he was condemned to death? It was because of blasphemy laws. That is what they used to condemn Christ. And there are some today who are calling for blasphemy laws in America. And they don't realize that's the exact thing that the religious leaders of their day used to crucify Christ. This is a famous artist depiction of the Jesus before Pilate. But before he went before Pilate, he stood trial before the Sanhedrin. That's the religious leaders. And you read the trial, you read what happened and what they got him on, because they he was blameless. What are you going to condemn him for? He didn't do anything wrong. What they finally said, we got something on him, is blasphemy laws. They said, look, he says something that we disagree with when it comes to religion. We say his beliefs were blasphemy. Now, were they blasphemy? No. But the religious leaders who had the power, they said, no, we're going to say it's blasphemy. That is the problem of having religious laws. Okay, so Matthew chapter 26, verse 65, then the high priest rent his clothes, because Jesus had just basically said, he had just declared himself to be God. So the high priest rent his clothes, saying, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need we have of witnesses? Behold, you have heard his blasphemy." What do you think? And he's speaking to his fellow religious leaders, and they answered and said, "He is guilty of death." So why was Christ condemned? Blasphemy laws. There's men in this country, unfortunately on the conservative side, who are calling for blasphemy laws again in America. The question is, who decides what blasphemy is? Government? Do you think government leaders, those corrupt men that we oppose having power in so many ways, you think that they could properly decide, pick and choose which church is the right church and which doctrines, which teachings are blasphemy and which ones aren't? No. What they would do is they would say, which religious leader tells me what I want to hear as a corrupt politician, and which religious leader is going to toe the line with me and maybe give me money. Now, there's your official church, and there's the teachings that will be allowed in this country. Corruption, that's what will happen. It's not a good idea. What about the apostles? What did the religious leaders say to the apostles? We won't read the text. You can read it for yourself in Acts 4, verses 18 through 20, and Acts 5, verses 28 through 29. They forbid the apostles, the Sanhedrin forbid John and Peter from speaking and teaching in the name of Jesus. No different than the papacy outlawing the Bible, forbidding the Protestants from teaching. No different. It's a repeat of history. And the apostles answered, we ought to obey God rather than men. And they were beaten for this. And some of them were thrown in jail by the religious leaders using religious laws. This is why we cannot have church and state unite. Yes, we need to have moral laws in this country. And I go back at the beginning of this lecture, I made it very clear. Moral laws, yes, but not religious laws. Religious laws led to St. Bartholomew's massacre and Christians being burned at the stake and William Tyndale being executed for simply printing the Bible because the Catholic leadership disagreed with him. Again, the first 4 commandments, the first table of stone of the 10 commandments deals with your relationship between you and God. You cannot enforce that with government. The last 6 deal with your relationship between your fellow men. Yes, those are moral laws. The sexual laws, the theft laws, the laws against murder. So we're including abortion. Let's make those laws. Yes, those are moral laws. And I think we should have strict ones on that. But you cannot legislate religion. That's the danger. And that's the dividing line. Okay? As long as we stick to just the last 6 of the 10 commandments, the second table of stone, we're fine. Once you start getting into the first 4, we need blasphemy laws and we need, this religion and that religion. And because then it turns into this church is not right. And then you're going to have Christians persecuting other Christians. And Jesus predicted that's what's going to happen. John 16, verse 2, Jesus says, they will kick you out of the synagogues. That's what happened back then. But in the future, it ended up being kicking you out of the churches. Yea, the time will come when he who kills you thinks he's doing God's service. That is a perfect prediction of what the Middle Ages was when the Catholic Church ruled and was killing good Christian men and thinking they were doing it in the name of God. What's coming to America? Does Bible prophecy mention America? Do we have a danger of going back and repeating the mistakes of the Middle Ages? That is going to be the subject of our next lecture, part 8 of our 9-part series, America and Prophecy. You do not want to miss that. Yes, America is mentioned in the book of Revelation very clearly. You are going to be shocked. Do not miss this one. All right, that's all we have for today. And thank you all for joining. And please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. This will be posted. It's live on all major social media platforms. Follow on X, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Just look up my name, Joshua Fontania. I appreciate you following me there and all these different places, and share this if you are blessed by it. Have a good day and God bless.